When Daniel Carter checked into the old Ravenswood Motel on the edge of the Nevada desert, he wasn't looking for comfort. He was hiding. The place was perfect. Cheap rooms, no questions asked, cash only. The motel stood like a lonely skeleton, surrounded by nothing but sand, broken fences, and a suffocating silence. Its neon sign flickered, as if fighting for its last breath. Ravens D. Motel. 2 letters had surrendered to the darkness years ago. It was 11:47 p.m. when Daniel walked in. The old clerk behind the counter seemed as worn down as the building. He didn't smile, barely spoke. He just slid a tarnished key across the scuffed wood. Room 307. Last room, the clerk said, his voice as dry as the desert air. Daniel asked, "Last room available?" The clerk just stared, his eyes empty. "No," he finally said. "Just the last room." Room 307 smelled of dust and decay. It was depressingly simple: 1 bed, a cracked mirror, a small bathroom. And one very strange detail: a second door. It was right next to the bathroom, but it made no sense. There was no handle, no lock, no visible hinges. It was just a flat wooden rectangle sealed into the wall, like a scar. Daniel tried pushing it, but it was solid as rock. He shrugged. Old buildings are full of weird quirks. He was too tired to care. At 2:13 a.m., a sound jolted him awake. Knock, knock. The sound wasn't coming from the main door to the hallway. It was coming from the second door, the one sealed in the wall. Daniel's heart began to hammer against his ribs. Someone was knocking from inside the wall. He crept out of bed, his feet cold on the grimy floor. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling. Only silence answered. He reached out and touched the door. It was ice cold. Then it came again. Knock, knock. Louder this time, more insistent. Daniel stumbled backward. "There's no room behind this," he whispered to himself, trying to rationalize the impossible. The knocking stopped. But in its place, a new sound began. Breathing. Slow, heavy, wet breathing, right on the other side of the wood. It was the sound of someone drowning in air. Panicked, Daniel lurched into the bathroom and flicked on the light, splashing cold water on his face to clear his head. He needed to think. But when he looked up at his reflection in the mirror, he froze. Foggy letters had been scrawled across the glass, as if by a phantom finger. The message said, "Don't open IT." Daniel cried out and stumbled back. He hadn't written that. He frantically wiped the mirror, and the words vanished like a ghost. He stepped out of the bathroom, his mind reeling. His phone buzzed. He grabbed it, desperate for a connection to the outside world. No signal, no internet. He glanced at the time. 2:13 a.m. That wasn't right. It had been minutes since he'd woken up. His blood ran cold. He looked at the cheap plastic clock on the wall. His hands were also frozen. 2:13 a.m. Time itself had stopped. And then a whisper slithered from behind the second door. Soft, broken, and chillingly familiar. "Daniel." He held his breath. It knew his name. "How do you know my name?" He choked out. The voice responded with a dry, rattling laugh, the sound of leaves skittering across a grave. "You left me here." Daniel's mind raced, searching for an explanation, for any memory that made sense. "I don't know who you are," he shouted. The voice whispered back, each word a drop of ice on his skin. "You locked the door." Suddenly a memory ignited in his mind, one he had buried for years. Not this motel, another place. An apartment fire, thick with black smoke and screams. A woman, pounding on her door from the inside, her cries for help lost in the roar of the flames. And him, standing in the hallway, frozen by fear before turning and running. He never looked back. He never even told anyone she was in there. Her name was Martha. As the memory consumed him, the second door began to creak open, all on its own. It had no hinges, but it swung inward into a void of perfect, consuming blackness. It was darker than night, and a wave of impossible cold washed over the room. From within that darkness, a hand crawled out. Its skin was charred and peeling, its fingers black and stumps. The hand clawed at the floor, dragging itself forward. Then an arm, then a face. Skin melted away from bone. Eyes were stark white orbs, and a mouth was stretched into an unnatural silent scream. It whispered, its voice the rustle of ash. "You never came back." Daniel screamed and scrambled backward, trying to get to the main door, but the handle wouldn't turn. It was welded shut. He looked at the windows, they were gone. The wall was solid. The room had trapped him. There was no outside anymore. Only the room and the thing that had come through the door. The burnt woman pulled herself to her feet, her legs twisted backward, her bones cracking with every sickening movement. "This is not a motel," she rasped, tilting her head at an impossible angle. "This is where forgotten guilt lives." Tears streamed down Daniel's face. "I was scared. I couldn't help." The creature took a shuffling step closer. "You didn't even try." As she spoke, the motel room dissolved around him. The peeling wallpaper melted away, replaced by smoke-stained walls and blistering paint. He was no longer in room 307. He was back in the burning apartment hallway from all those years ago. The fire alarms shrieked, and he could hear Martha pounding on her door, screaming his name. "Help him, Daniel." Just like that night, but this time he couldn't run. His feet were rooted to the floor. He was frozen, forced to watch, forced to relive the moment of his greatest shame. The burnt figure of Martha drifted toward him through the smoke. "You left me behind," she whispered, her voice filled with an eternity of sorrow and rage. "So now, you stay behind." The heat intensified, scorching his skin. He screamed, a raw, desperate cry. "I'm sorry." She leaned in close, her cold breath on his ear. Too late. With a single effortless push, she sent him falling backward. The floor gave way, and Daniel plunged through and landed in darkness. He was back in room 307, but now he was on the other side of the second door, trapped. He threw himself against the wood, his fists pounding, his voice raw. "Let me out!" Knock, knock, knock. Morning sunlight streamed into the motel lobby. The old clerk stood at his post, wiping the counter with a dirty rag. A new traveler walked in, dropping a bag on the floor. "Room for the night?" he asked. The clerk slid a familiar key across the counter. "Room 307. Anything I should know?" The traveler asked with a tired smile. The clerk's lips twitched into something resembling a grin. "Just don't open the second door." And a desperate whisper, lost in the silence of the old motel. "Please, don't leave me here." But the new guest didn't hear it. Because, as he unlocked his room, the clock on the wall inside had just ticked over to 2:13 a.m. again.